matter how many times I teach this course or any fundamentals in programming class, my students all end up in the same problem once we get to the end of the first part. And that is, they simply don't know where to start when I give them a problem. And that's a problem. That in itself is a problem. So putting the steps together in order to overcome this issue is what our goal for today is. To do this, we're going to break our computers down and our software down into 4 basic operations that all computers handle. And we've already talked about these previously, but just to reiterate, we know that computers do 4 things. They handle input. Now, of course, this is the matter, depending on the language you're working in, you might get that through console, you might get that through text box or something like that, depending on the input you're dealing with, depending on the language you're dealing with. And then on top of that, next thing we have is processing. Now, processing is, of course, when we start to manipulate the data. Now, that could be data gotten from the input, it could be data gotten from some other source. Now, processing is just changing the information. And then, of course, once we've processed that information, we need to store the results. Now, this is where we handle variables and whatnot. Now, processing and storage go hand in hand so much that sometimes these two pieces are put together into one section, just processing and storage. And then finally is output. Now, depending on the language, again, this might be outputting in a console, it might be outputting onto a label, it might be outputting graphics, it might be outputting sound. It depends on the type of software you're actually building. But these are the 4 operations of our basic computers. And again, as I mentioned before, processing and storage are often combined. So instead of putting the IPSO acronym, we're going to use the IPO acronym instead. Oh my goodness. There we go. And this is going to be our guide for today. Our goal is to create a chart, a graphical organizer to help us organize our thoughts. So once we're done this organizer, we'll be able to just use it and transfer all of that information into our code. Now, this organizer is meant to be done in English and in a general sense. And what I mean by that is it should be English language that's used within the columns of the table. And there should be nothing programming language specific. So I shouldn't see anything Java or C# or Turing specific in it. And the idea behind that is that we keep it general in nature so it can be applied to any language. Of course, this is not always easy to do, but we do our best when we can. So that would mean things like you shouldn't have anything regarding buttons or text boxes or anything specific like that, because not all languages can handle those types of graphical elements. So to do this, I've created a simple little table here, and inside of each of these columns I'm going to describe what should go in here. And this is going to help you organize your thoughts. And once we're done this, we're going to go over an example in the next module of how to actually apply this and use it effectively. And this is going to be kind of our running example that we're going to use for all of our design and professional practice modules that we're going to see in the upcoming little while. So input. This is all about getting information from the user. So in this column, what we're going to do is we're going to, let's see if I can insert a bullet point here. We're going to put describe or define input variables. So variables used for input. Makes sense. Now that could be, a description of this might be a variable name as well as the type of data it's stored. Now, sometimes that may be like an integer, or that might be something like a decimal value or something like that. Again, it should be general in nature if possible, but sometimes you can't avoid it. A bool is a bool. This is what it is. So that is the main thing that's going to go inside this column. And you might have 5 things, you might have 25 things here. Now these variables you put here, they're going to be the main variables for the program. In larger scale programs, you'll find that listing every variable you're going to use in the program here is impossible, and you shouldn't be doing that anyway. The next thing that's going to go in here, we're going to set up another set of variables. In this case, it's not just the variables for the input. This time it's describing or defining variables of known values. Variables for known values. Now that doesn't necessarily mean constants, although it could. It could be like pi, for example. But it might be just known information given in the problem itself, right? So, for example, if you're creating a program that calculates the area of a circle, and you just happen to know that the radius is always 5.3 meters squared, or sorry, 5.3 meters, then that is a known value. So Why would you even do a variable for that? Again, readability reasons, same as we always do. We want that representation of the data so that we don't get the magic number of 5.3. We actually get information. We know what that number represents. So that's the input column. That's all that goes in there. So you're just going to have a list of variables, or you're going to have a description, one bullet point per variable, and describe the type of data it is going to store. So the next column is the biggest and most important column, and that's the processing column. This is where all the magic happens. This should be the biggest column in your table, because this is where all the work is going to get done. So here, again, I'm just going to put a quick little bullet point here, and in here we're going to describe what data processing is to occur here. Now the important thing here is in order. I want to know exactly which processing occurs in which order. So basic examples of this, just to kind of apply this. First thing that I should see inside your processing column is prompts and retrieval. So prompt and retrieval of input data. So I don't need the specific text or anything like that. I just need to know that you're prompting and retrieving for what type of data we're talking about here. So if you're asking the user for the length of a rectangle, you would just say something like ask for and retrieve the length of the rectangle from the user. All right, so we know where it's coming from and we know what it is. The next thing is you're probably going to need to do some calculations. So that means that you should be describing or defining. I spelled describe wrong. Oops. Define. Trouble typing today. Describe or define variables for calculations. Now this may not just be the end result of the calculation. There may be some middle point as well. You may need to calculate some midpoint data before you can get to the final data. That's fine. And once you've actually done that, perform any other actions required. Now this may be doing the calculation. This may be making some decisions and performing certain actions such as playing sound effects or something along those lines. It could be anything in here that involves processing. Key here though is that there should be one bullet per piece of processing. And that includes one for each variable that's defined in here as well. And we have one final column. I'm just going to move this down a little bit so I have a little bit of space. And in this final column, this is the easiest column. All I want here is a description. So describe the exact, oh my goodness, the exact text that is to be shown to the user. Now, I say text, but it doesn't necessarily have to be text. It could be just about anything, because depending on the type of software you're building, there may not be any text involved in your program at all. It could be graphical, it could be audio, it could be any form of output possible, but I should get a good exact description of exactly what the user should see. Now, if it is text, then what I would like to see is, I would like to see the use of quotes, and I would like to see concatenation with variables. This is very clear. So basically, here's a quick little example. Display your age is plus user age. So we see exactly that word display tells me that it is text output, and I'm saying your age is, and I'm concatenating that with a variable user age. So that's the basics of doing our IPO charts. Now remember, all you have to do once you finish this chart is just work from left to right, top to bottom, and you'll be done. And it's as simple as that in our smaller programs. Now the larger programs, they use the same idea. The difference is they'll do this same IPO model millions of times in a single program. All of our programs are going to follow this four-step input, processing, storage, output process in order. All of our programs. Again, the bigger ones are just going to do it a lot more than the smaller ones. So that's it for this module. The next module, we're going to look at an example, help clarify things.